Our epistle reading this morning, our second reading, is taken from 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verses 5 through 12. Listen to what the Spirit might speak into your life in this reading from 2 Corinthians. Paul is writing here to the church at Corinth for the second time. And he says this: "For we do not proclaim ourselves. We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, 'Let the light shine out of darkness,' who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For while we live, we are always being given up to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you." May God bless to our understanding this reading from God's holy word, and to God's name be glory and praise. Amen. Let us meditate on the mystery of time. Okay, so Paul Tillich used that line to begin a sermon many years ago, and I thought it was great. I wondered if I could pull it off, but I'm not Paul Tillich. And yet Paul Tillich is a theologian, and many theologians are not great preachers. But I found it compelling to begin a sermon with this encouragement to meditate on the mystery of time. What do we have that time did not give us? And which of those things will time not take back according to its good pleasure? Time made you who you are. Everything had to fall just so for you to become the person that you are. Time loaned us all the things that we call our own: the skills, the abilities, the relationships, the fears, the mortgages, the joys, the papers that we hold in our fields, the debts, moral and financial. Time's not a thief. Some people say it's a thief. It's a loan shark. Time loans us things and takes them back according to its wisdom or its whims, whatever you want to put there. Time, the wise teacher whose lessons are cumulative. Time, the severe instructor who tests us on things that we haven't learned yet and sends us pop quizzes on things we learned so long ago that we've almost forgotten. Time. How are we to make sense of time, our great hope and our great despair? Time in whose fleeting passage we catch but glimpses of the eternity into which it all flows. Wisely and truly, the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians, we have this treasure in clay jars that do not last. They break, they grow old, they crumble, but the treasure that they contain does not. Which of our treasures really is not kept in a fragile, breakable, impermanent jar of clay? The very thing that makes life so sweet is the fact that it's transient. We must hold it in clay jars, and the jars will break, but the life will not. Our bodies and all the things we know must pass the way of all flesh, but our loving and our living and our faith, these touch on something eternal. These are the treasure in the clay jar. So I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I wonder how many people here have ever heard of St. Cuthbert. St. Cuthbert. Yes, he's on a show. There's a St. Cuthbert's Hospital apparently on a show that's popular right now. Let me tell you about St. Cuthbert. St. Cuthbert was a hermit who lived in the 7th century, in the 600s, and he brought Christianity to much of Scotland and northern England. And I just got back yesterday from that place, from a pilgrimage on St. Cuthbert's Way, which follows the footsteps of this saint that before the pilgrimage, frankly, I had never heard of, because I haven't watched that show. It follows the saint's footsteps 60 miles from the ruins of a monastery in Melrose, Scotland, to the Holy Island, and this is what they call it, the Holy Island of Lindisfarne in the far north of England. It was a clergy retreat, and there were 10 pastors, American pastors, climbing hills and taking off their shoes and walking through rivers in an old-fashioned act of pilgrimage, which is becoming very popular once again. We got drenched. Even on the days when it said it wasn't going to rain, it rained. It rained every single day in Scotland and northern England, and not just a little. And then in the evenings, we would gather at whatever inn or hotel they had arranged for us, and we would be led by the group leaders would guide us in prayerful meditations on the life of St. Cuthbert. Now, I say there were 10 of us, but 2 of them chickened out right from the gate. They didn't even show up at the train station. We didn't know what happened to them. Another 2 learned the very first day that those hills were too much for them. They couldn't do it. And then a third one figured that out by the 3rd day. And then we were 5. Our destination was the Holy Island. That's really what they call it in England to this day, Holy Island, also known as Lindisfarne. It's a tidal island. That's to say it's only an island when the tide is high. When the tide is down, you can walk to it on the floor of the ocean, 3 miles. But once you get on it and the tide comes up, you're stuck there, because even the road goes underwater when the tide goes up. It felt so medieval. It felt penitential to walk 3 miles barefoot in the sand with the tides of the ocean encroaching. But truly, it was a magnificent trip, walking through the British countryside that you would see on some old BBC miniseries, talking to colleagues about those things in ministry that most people never think about. While there were sheep everywhere, watched on in mute encouragement. Presbyterianism is the official religion of Scotland, and so going there was a bit like going home to the mother ship. It felt odd, though, to meditate each night on the life and the example of one of the people who brought Christianity to that place, and then during the day to hike past all the derelict, empty churches that sit in village and market town and city in Scotland and northern England. The faith came in the Dark Ages, carried by strange men who shaved the tops of their heads and who lived in beehive-shaped cells. People flocked to them to get baptized in the ocean or in the rivers. By the Middle Ages, everybody was Christian. Everybody. They constructed these magnificent edifices to the glory of God. At the Reformation in the 1500s, they switched from Catholic to Presbyterian, and they painted over all the icons, and they cast down all the statues, and they laid waste to the monasteries, but still, they remained devoted to the faith. Today, I would say a third of those churches sit silent and empty. People in the United Kingdom, they're not opposed to church, they're not against religion, they're just bored by it. They're just inoculated against it. They've had just enough of it to make them immune to its charms. Church feels musty. It feels stale. It feels like the day before yesterday. Something you don't want to relive. Time. Time brought the church to that place. Time changed the church through many iterations. Time saw the church decline. And what time holds for the church, we don't know. Treasure in clay jars. Nothing made of clay will last forever. And yet surely the message of hope, the message of new life, the message of eternal love, the message of justice, the message of peace will always live on beyond the clay jars with which we try to contain it and protect it. The jars erode, they return to their red dust, but faith and life and love, these will always run free, and they will always find jars to contain them for a time, though they can never fully contain them. We have this treasure in clay jars, the apostle tells his readers in Corinth. What treasure? The hope of the gospel, the very idea that life is beautiful and good, that it has meaning, that it has purpose, that what we do here matters, that it's not just temporary, that somehow it touches eternity, that our living is bigger than perhaps we know, that life is not random, that in life and in death we participate in something bigger than ourselves. The hope of the gospel is ultimately the promise that our bodies, these jars of clay, though they are subject to the changes of time, as is our language and our achievements and the systems that we create, although they are subject to the changes of time still, we participate in something that stretches beyond time, something bigger than us. We belong to eternity. From it we come, to it we return. And in the meantime, and in the in-between time, there is nothing to fear. Our bodies are mere clay, and like clay, they will decay. Like our imperfect earthly systems, they fail, they change. But our living, no matter how badly we bungle it, our living, no matter how unexamined, touches on eternity. I don't know if anybody remembers the old country singer Don Williams. For some reason, he was very popular in the 1990s when I was living in Cameroon. It was very odd to hear these old 1970s Don Williams songs crooning in Cameroon, Africa in the 1990s. But he was quite the poet, and he says it like this: "Time is a teacher. It's kind and it's cruel. It gives you the wisdom to see you're a fool. It gives love and takes love. It hurts and it heals, and it never parts easy with the truth it reveals." What does time not take from us? Of all the many gifts that it gives us. It slowly claims our vision, our balance, our memory, sometimes our mental acumen, our strength. And so what comfort is there for us who live in these bodies of clay? These clay jars that will someday break. These complex, mysterious treasures crammed into these clay jars. It's the treasure itself, the mystery of our life. It's in the breakable pottery of our bodies. What precious thing do you possess that is not held within a simple clay jar? The clay of your skin and your nerves and your brain, your heart. Truly, the valuable things in life are not held in our bank accounts, but in the so-called jars of clay, the brains, the nerves. Lesser things. Things like money, things like power, things like prestige and fame, these demand a grander container than a jar of clay. But the treasure of our personalities, the irreplaceable treasure of our memories, of our joys, of our hopes, the treasure of our life itself, so brief, so imperfect, it's kept in a jar of clay, a jar that will break. Priceless things need no ornate trappings to hold them. Life, love, joy, they will not be contained in a mahogany chest. They won't fit into cedar drawers with brass handles. The real treasures of life can only make their home in a breakable jar of clay, these impermanent bodies. Among these treasures are the many tangled relationships that make up a life, and the memories, both painful and bright, that make us into the people that we are, and the loves and the skills and the desires that we invest into the life of the world, into our time and our days, that make up our substance. The great irony is that the things that we spend most of our time on and give most of our energy to are the things that don't matter. The things that we lock away, the things we try to protect, the things that don't fit inside these jars of clay. Things like money, accomplishment, things that will slip away and be forgotten. And so knowing this, knowing that these jars of clay will break, what matters for you today? What really matters when you leave this place, when you go out to face your world? What matters? What doesn't? Does it change anything to know that the treasure is always in a clay jar? The real treasure is never in a treasure chest. It's always in these jars of clay. Let us meditate on the mystery of time. It can only take from us the things that it gives us. It cannot steal the things that it cannot reach, which are the gifts of eternity. Amen.